You don't wake up one morning and see civilization collapse. You wake up and notice that something small didn't work today, and nobody seemed surprised. The train was late, the shelves were thinner, the helpline never answered, and everyone quietly adjusted their expectations downward. That's how collapse actually begins. Not with fire, but with acceptance. And the most dangerous part is that you're living inside it while being told it's temporary. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody likes to say out loud. Complex societies don't fall because of a single catastrophe. They fall because they become too expensive, energetically, psychologically, and socially, to maintain. Civilization is a machine that runs on surplus, extra food, extra energy, extra trust, extra time. When that surplus shrinks, systems don't explode. They shed layers. Maintenance first, redundancy next. Then competence. What you're left with still looks like civilization, but it no longer behaves like one. You can see the first sign in infrastructure. Roads patched instead of replaced, power grids stretched decades past their design life, water systems quietly leaking more than they deliver. This isn't incompetence, it's triage. Engineers know how to fix these systems. The math just doesn't work anymore. When a society can't afford preventive maintenance, it enters a feedback loop where breakdowns consume the resources that would have prevented the next breakdown. From a survival perspective, this matters because infrastructure failure is never evenly distributed. It fails at the edges first. Rural areas, poorer neighborhoods, peripheral regions. If you live somewhere that repairs take longer every year, that's not bad luck. It's a signal. Another sign shows up in supply chains, and this one hits closer to home. Modern life runs on just-in-time delivery, which means nothing is stored locally because storage costs money. The system works beautifully when everything works, but it has no buffer. A dock strike, a fuel shortage, a currency wobble, or a geopolitical hiccup can empty shelves in days. You're told not to panic because panic is the only thing more dangerous than scarcity. But here's the survival logic. A system that requires everyone to remain calm at all times in order to function is not resilient. The moment normal people start adjusting behavior, buying two instead of one, the system interprets that as an attack. That's why shortages cascade so fast. From a biological standpoint, your brain is wired to detect this early. If you feel a low-level anxiety while shopping, that's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. Then there's institutional drift. Rules multiply, but accountability thins. You notice it when forms replace outcomes, when metrics matter more than results, when nobody is allowed to improvise. This happens because large systems fear blame more than failure. Over time, decision-making migrates upward while responsibility dissolves outward. In survival terms, this creates a vacuum at the local level. When emergencies happen, the response is delayed not by malice, but by procedure. That's why communities that survive prolonged crises don't wait for permission. They default to informal networks, neighbors, family, trade, shared tools. Trust becomes local again because large-scale trust is too slow to deploy. Psychologically, one of the clearest signs of slow collapse is emotional numbing. When crises become constant, your nervous system adapts by caring less. That's not resilience, that's fatigue. Humans evolved to handle short bursts of danger followed by recovery. Endless low-grade stress degrades judgment, memory, and social bonds. You see it in rising hostility over small things, in the way people snap in traffic or withdraw completely. From a survival standpoint, emotional regulation becomes a critical skill. The people who endure are not the strongest or the angriest, but the ones who can downshift their nervous system, think clearly under chronic stress, and maintain cooperative relationships when fear would prefer isolation. This section is based on practical field survival experience rather than formal academic sources. Energy is another quiet tell. Every civilization is an energy story. When energy becomes more expensive, everything else does too. Food, water, transportation, medicine. The danger isn't running out overnight. The danger is declining energy return, where it takes more effort to extract, refine, and distribute energy than before. That squeezes every layer of society simultaneously. From a physics standpoint, complexity requires energy. When energy margins shrink, complexity unravels. Systems simplify, choices narrow. If you want to survive long-term instability, your personal energy budget matters. Skills that require less external energy, Manual tools, passive heating and cooling, food preservation without refrigeration become more valuable than high-tech solutions that depend on fragile supply chains. One of the most ignored signs is moral fragmentation, not a loss of values, but too many competing ones. When groups can no longer agree on basic definitions of fairness, responsibility, or truth, coordination breaks down. That's deadly in emergencies. Survival favors groups that can act quickly with shared assumptions. This doesn't mean uniformity, it means alignment. On a personal level, this is why choosing who you trust matters more than what you stockpile. Skills and supplies can be taken. Trust has to be built ahead of time, slowly, before it's needed. Finally, pay attention to normalization. The most dangerous sentence in a collapsing system is "this is the new normal." Humans are incredibly adaptable, which is both our greatest strength and our biggest weakness. We can survive almost anything, but we can also tolerate almost anything, including slow deterioration, as long as it happens gradually. From a survival perspective, the goal isn't panic, it's calibration. Knowing when inconvenience becomes instability, when instability becomes risk, and when risk becomes action. The people who make it through periods of slow collapse aren't waiting for a dramatic moment to change their behavior. They're quietly adjusting while the lights are still on, learning while systems still function, building resilience while help is still available. Civilization doesn't vanish, it thins, it frays, it becomes unreliable. And by the time most people agree something is wrong, the window for easy adaptation has already closed. The signs are not hidden, they're just boring, gradual, and easy to ignore. Until one day, ignoring them costs more than paying attention ever would have. The next stage of slow collapse is where adaptation quietly splits people into two groups, even though they still live on the same street. One group keeps trying to preserve the old normal, spending energy pretending the system will bounce back if they just wait long enough. The other group starts changing how they live without announcing it. They simplify routines, reduce dependencies, learn small practical skills, and stop assuming that outside help will arrive on schedule. The difference isn't ideology, it's biological. One mindset conserves energy and reduces risk. The other keeps betting on a system that no longer guarantees a return. You see this clearly in how people handle fragility. Fragile systems look strong right up until they fail completely. Resilient systems look inefficient, even wasteful because they carry slack. Extra tools, extra food, extra time. In nature, nothing survives on the edge of efficiency. Trees store energy, animals build fat, ecosystems overlap functions so that if one species declines, another fills the gap. Modern civilization removed slack to maximize profit and speed, and that worked until conditions changed. Personal survival follows the same rule. If every part of your life depends on perfect timing, uninterrupted services, and stable institutions, then your life is fragile by design. This is where preparation stops being about gear and starts being about behavior. People imagine survival as dramatic action, but real resilience is boring. It's knowing how to fix instead of replace, knowing how to wait without panicking, knowing how to say no when everyone else is rushing toward the same failing solution. In prolonged instability, the most dangerous instinct is imitation. When systems fail, crowds don't become smarter. They become louder. They copy each other, amplify bad ideas, and drain resources faster. Survival logic often means doing the opposite of what feels socially comfortable. There's also a subtle shift in how time works during collapse. Long-term planning disappears, replaced by short horizons. Institutions think in quarters, individuals think in days. Stress compresses the future. From a neurological standpoint, chronic uncertainty pushes the brain into survival mode, prioritizing immediate reward and threat avoidance. That's why addiction, impulsive behavior, and reckless decisions rise during prolonged decline. Understanding this gives you an edge. If you can consciously extend your time horizon, weeks instead of days, years instead of months, you regain strategic thinking. That alone separates survivors from casualties. Another ignored signal is the loss of repair culture. When fewer people know how things work, systems become opaque and untouchable. You're told not to fix, only to replace, not to understand, only to use. In stable times, this feels convenient. In unstable times, it's deadly. Knowledge becomes a form of insulation, not abstract knowledge, but hands-on familiarity with everyday systems, water, food, shelter, health. The more layers between you and basic needs, the more exposed you are when those layers crack. This section is based on practical field survival experience rather than formal academic sources. As collapse progresses slowly, morality shifts from abstract rules to situational ethics. People stop asking what's right and start asking what works. This isn't evil, it's adaptation. But it's also dangerous if you haven't decided your lines in advance. Survival under long stress tests character quietly. The people who endure without becoming hollow are the ones who define their values early and stick to them even when nobody is watching. Community survives collapse longer than infrastructure does, but only if trust is protected deliberately. Eventually, you reach the stage where collapse becomes invisible because it's normalized. Services still exist, but they're unreliable. Laws still exist, but enforcement is selective. Money still exists, but its meaning changes. At that point, asking whether civilization has collapsed misses the point. The more useful question is whether it can still be trusted. And trust, once broken at scale, doesn't return quickly. The purpose of seeing these signs isn't fear, it's orientation. Maps don't cause storms, they help you navigate them. Understanding slow collapse doesn't mean giving up on society or retreating into isolation. It means adjusting expectations to reality, so reality stops surprising you. The people who suffer most are not those with the least resources, but those with the most illusions. If there's a hopeful truth buried in all of this, it's that humans are extraordinarily adaptable when they stop pretending. You don't need to predict the future to survive it. You just need to notice what's already changing and respond earlier than most. Collapse rewards awareness, flexibility, and humility far more than strength or certainty. Civilizations rise loudly, but they fade quietly. And while you can't stop that process alone, you can decide whether you're dragged by it or move with it. Pay attention to the small failures. They are the language of big change. And if you learn to listen now, while things still mostly work, you won't be asking what went wrong later. You'll already know.